Good morning and welcome to James chapter 1, verses 17 through 27. This is episode number 3 of our study of the book of James. Last time we had talked in the book of James about this idea and this concept of temptation. Temptation, test, trial, and tribulation are all the same word in the Greek language. And so regardless of what those words are or how they're presented in the Bible, they all come from the same root word. Last time we had read in James chapter 1, verses 13 through 16. God was saying this, or James was writing this through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Let no one say when he is tempted that I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself does not tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brethren. And I just want to give you a quick recap of that to just try to clarify a little bit about what I was talking about last time. And I want to jot some things down here for you on the screen to help you understand the picture of what was going on. So James is writing this and talking about the fact that each one of us is tempted, and what we are all tempted by are things that come from within us. We are tempted not by God. We are tempted from a unique. That's where the word that means each one is tempted by his own. His own is the word idiosyncrasy, so it's a unique lust or a unique desire that happens within all of us. That's where this temptation occurs. It's not from God, it's something that's unique to each one of us. We all have trigger points that we can easily be tempted by, and it's something that not everybody might be tempted by. It's a uniqueness given to each one of us, and that's what James says. We are all tempted by a unique lust or desire that is unique to each one of us. Now, it clarifies this further in 1 John chapter 2 verses 15 and 16 if you want to read this. And here's what 1 John 2:15 and 16 says. It says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For everything in the world," so this is all things in the world, all of the temptations in the world are wrapped up in the next three things he's going to say. "For everything in the world, the desire of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the boasting of life is not from the Father, but from the world." So he is going to give three categories to define all of what sin is. And here are the categories that he says. First, you have the desire of the flesh. So that's one category. So note this, we have a category that's a flesh category. And then the second one, he says, the desire of the eyes. So that's the eyes category. And the third one, he says, is the boasting of life. Now, what is the boasting of life? Other versions say the pride of life, and that's probably a better descriptive word, so you could think of pride as the third category. All sin falls into one of these three categories. You can narrow every sinful thing down into one of these categories. What is a fleshly category? Well, the flesh is anything that makes your flesh feel good. It's anything that you use to make your flesh in terms of escape. And what kind of things would fall in the categories of the flesh? Well, you can have sexual sin that falls in that. You can have alcoholism. You can have drug abuse. You can have food can fall into this. Exercise can even fall into this. It's anything that you use with your flesh in order to use it in a way that's contrary to what God has designed. God has designed us in a certain way, and anytime we are using a sinful means in order to make our flesh feel better, that is going to fall into that category. What is the sin of the eyes? What is the desire of the eyes or the lust of the eyes? Well, that is anything that you can see. That's coveting. Coveting falls within this. So you think of materialism, greed, coveting, those all fall in this thing of the eyes. You can also even put another sexual sin into that category, which would be pornography, which really crosses the line between both flesh and eyes, but you can put that into this category. Anything you see you want, anything you see you have to have, anything that you think is going to make you feel full and feel alive, which is what sin does. And then pride is the fact that life has to be about us. It is a self-centeredness in life, a self-focus in life. And so all three categories of sin are the uniquenesses that we are being tempted by according to James. And you have something in your life, or several things in your life that really fall into one of these categories that Satan will use against you in order to entice you to sin. We are enticed in three ways. So there's three components, three things that cause us to sin in life. So the three forms of sin, or the three battles that we face, is one, we face a battle with the world. And the world and its system tempts us to sin. The world is anti-God. It's set up as anti-God. Satan is the ruler of this world, and the world is one of the battles that we will face. Number two, another battle that we face is the flesh. We have our own fleshly desires. We have the sinful nature. The flesh sins really is what we tend to bite on the most. And then number three, you have the devil himself. And the devil is not like God. He's not all-knowing. He's not all-powerful. He's not ever-present. But he is very organized, and he has a horde of demons at his disposal. He's like a very organized military force. So we fight those battles and we face those temptations in our lives and in our worlds. Now, go back to these three categories of sin. The battle that we face in these three categories of sin are also the same three ways that Eve was tempted in the garden. She was tempted, and it was three things that she was tempted with. It says in that point in Genesis chapter 3. And let me turn to that and read that for you. In Genesis chapter 3, when the fruit was presented before her, and Satan presented this as a option for sin, it says that the woman saw, verse 6 of chapter 3, now the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was a thing of lust for the eyes, and that it was desirable for imparting wisdom. So what are those three categories? That was the flesh right here, the flesh. She saw that it was good for food. That's a fleshly temptation. It was a thing of lust for the eyes. Well, that's that category right there. And then it was desirable for imparting wisdom. Wisdom, the pride of life, the desire to be wise, the desire to have life all about me. Do you know that when Jesus was tempted by Satan, he was also tempted with all three of these same categories? That was the temptation that Jesus fought. He battled him with the word. He did not succumb to any of those, being the only one who didn't fall to any of these three categories of sin. So all sin in the world is really boiled down to these three categories, and James says it this way, that each one of us is tempted when we are drawn away by our own desires and we are enticed. That is how Satan fishes for us. It's how he hunts for us. He hunts using a sin that falls into one of these categories. We are unique in the fact that there are things that will tempt me that won't tempt you, and things that will tempt you that won't tempt me. We are all unique. We have a bait that we are being fished for, and we have a tendency to bite on that bait. And when we do, we are hooked. And when we are hooked, we are reeled up and we are tossed in the deck of the boat, and we are now a fish out of water. We have been moved away from the water, which is life for the fish. And it's the same thing that happens to us. God is our life. And when we are tempted to sin, we are hooked, we are reeled up, we are thrown on the deck of the boat, and now we are away from the life that God wants to offer us. So that's the recap from last time, and I hope that clarifies some things about what I was talking about in James, in the first part of James chapter 1. Now let's get into verse 17 and pick it up from there with that background in mind, because James is building upon that thought. So let's jump into this. So James writes this. He says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and it comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of his creatures." Now, previously, I had just talked about this idea of temptation. And so the word temptation is an interesting word that you need to understand a little bit more about what it actually means. A temptation is a solicitation to satisfy a legitimate desire in an illegitimate way. Let me say that again. And in fact, let me make note of this. A temptation is a solicitation to what? To fulfill a legit desire in an illegit way. That's what a temptation is. A temptation is a solicitation to fulfill a legitimate desire in an illegitimate way. Now, what does that mean to you exactly? What does that mean to me exactly? Well, we have within us legitimate desires. What are some legitimate desires? Well, every one of us has a desire to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want to be worthwhile. We want to be significant in life, not just worthwhile, but significant. We want to have hope. We want to have meaning. We want to have purpose. So we want to have purpose in life. We want to have belonging. Those are all legitimate desires that we have. Those are all within us. And so what is it God saying? Every good gift, every perfect gift is from above. And so what does God do? He gives us and satisfies these legitimate gifts. They come to us from God alone, God himself. He gives us these good gifts. Every one of us wants to and has a legitimate desires to be loved, accepted, worthwhile. We want to have hope and meaning and purpose and belonging. We want to be accepted and not rejected. We want all of these things for our lives. And so God says, look, every good gift comes from me, the Father of lights. And with me there is no variation or shadow of turning. What does that mean? It means there's no, a shadow is something that's not real. It gives the outline, but it's not a legitimate thing. With God there is no outline. It is what you see is what you get. With him there is no darkness. There is no lies. There is no misconceived ideas. God is legitimate, and everything he gives you is legitimate, and in him there is no change. He doesn't change. He doesn't change his mind. He doesn't change his way. So all that I have as a need in life, I have it met in God himself. He meets the inner desires of my soul. I want to be loved and accepted and worthwhile and have hope and meaning and purpose and belonging. And God said, look, I will give all of it to you. I am the source of your life. I am the source of everything that you were searching for. We have legitimate needs, and God is the one who legitimately meets them in legitimate ways. But here's the problem, and here's where the temptation comes in, and here's what the temptation says. It's a solicitation to fulfill legitimate desires in illegitimate ways. So instead of looking to God, who will promise to meet every need that I have, the need for love and acceptance and worth and significance and belonging and hope and purpose and all of that, now I start looking for illegitimate things to meet those needs. So what do? I look to maybe relationships. And some of you have jumped from relationship to relationship. You have been looking for the right woman, the right man, the right person to ultimately fulfill. And you think, well, if I can just find the right person, that will fulfill the inward desire. And what you're doing is you are looking for an illegitimate way to fulfill a legitimate need in your heart. Not to say that relationships are bad, but relationships will never fulfill everything that you are needing them to fulfill. A relationship cannot replace God. Your spouse, your children, a boyfriend, a girlfriend cannot replace God in your life. He is the only one that can meet those legitimate needs. Now, when you have those legitimate needs met, you will then be a healthy, functioning person. But if you're looking for illegitimate ways to meet those needs, you will always be wanting and always be searching for more. Other people think, well, money, that's the way that I'm going to have my needs met. If I can just make enough money, then I will feel love and acceptance and purpose and significance and all of that belonging that I crave. And it never satisfies because this cannot satisfy. These cannot satisfy. You look for materialistic things that the money can buy. So materialistic uh, uh, things such as homes and cars and toys and boats and four-wheelers and snowmobiles. And the sad thing is none of this will ever satisfy you. It's not evil in and of itself, but if you are looking to these things to satisfy a legitimate need, you will never find fulfillment. God is the only one who can fulfill the legitimate needs in our hearts. Relationships, money, materialistic things, jobs that we do, pride in ourselves, pride in our life, lusts that we go after, cravings like drugs and alcohol. None of that stuff will ever satisfy the cravings in my heart. Those are illegitimate ways to try to fill a legitimate need. We have legitimate needs, but none of those things will ever fulfill them. Only God can do that. Every good gift and every perfect gift comes from God above. So what tends to happen in life is this, is that we are, as people, and just think of it this way, we are empty on the inside. We have legitimate needs in here. We have a legitimate need, love, acceptance, meaning, purpose, belonging, contentment, peace, whatever it might be, all of that. It's a legitimate need in my heart. Christ has said, I can fulfill that for you. So Jesus is the fulfillment. God says every good gift, every perfect gift, it comes from me. I will fulfill your needs in your life. But we don't look to him to do it. So instead, what do? Instead of looking to God to fulfill those needs in my heart, here I am empty, I look for other things. I look for people, or I look for money, or I look for jobs, or I look to material things, or I look to escape things, drugs, alcohol, whatever. I look to those kind of illegitimate things to fulfill, again, my legitimate need. And they will never do it. And what tends to happen is you then try to meet somebody else, and you find somebody else in life who is also empty, and you look to that person to fill you up, and they look to you to fill them up, and now you have two empty people trying to fill each other. And that is a recipe for disaster. And so what is God's principle in all of this? Well, his principle in all of this is only he can fulfill the longings and the cravings of our hearts. Every good gift and every perfect gift to fulfill those legitimate needs that we have is from above, not from below. It comes from only God alone. As soon as you realize that, everything else falls into the proper perspective in life. You realize, you know what? Money is not in and of itself evil, but money will never satisfy my cravings. Money will never satisfy the legitimate needs of my heart. You look at vehicles and you think, well, vehicles are not in and of themselves evil, but they will never satisfy the legitimate needs of my heart. People, relationships, we're called to love others. In and of themselves, people are not evil. They're not wrong, but they aren't able to fulfill the legitimate needs of my heart. Once I have Christ in my life and I accept the gift that he offers me, now in my heart, I have a sense of not emptiness, I have a sense of fullness. And when I have fullness in my heart, because he has given me every good and perfect gift from above, now, instead of looking for what I can get, now I look for what I can give. I'm full on the inside. And when I'm full on the inside, I tend to be kind and loving and functioning right in life out of that fullness. It comes out of a fullness from within. But if you're not full within, if you're looking for an illegitimate way to meet a legitimate need, then you're going to never be satisfied. You'll always be wanting. It is Christ and Christ alone who gives us every good and perfect gift that comes from above. With him, there is no variation or shadow of turning. What does that mean? It means his promises are true. He doesn't change. There's no variation, no shadow that is being cast, because there is no darkness in God. What he says he means, what he says he does, what he promises he keeps. He does not change. He is the same now, yesterday, and forever. Of his own will he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Now, what that means is this, that God made us to be in relationship with him, that's where we find our meaning. It's where we find our purpose. It's where we find our hope, our belonging, our acceptance, our love, our worth, all comes through direct relationship with him, and this is why he has created us. But when we live life apart from Christ, looking for illegitimate ways to fulfill the legitimate need, we will always be empty. Well, let's keep going real quickly. So we'll conclude with these verses today. I was going to go further today, but I'm just not going to be able to get through more than this here today. We'll finish with verses 19 and 20, and James writes these words. He says, "So then, my beloved brethren." Now, when he says that idea of "so then," that's tying into everything he just said. Now, I want you to think about what I just said. Temptations are a solicitation to fulfill legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. But Christ has come in with every good and perfect gift. He has created us for relationship with him. So now, when he has filled our hearts, that filling of our hearts will directly impact how we live life. He will help us to have a right kind of understanding of how we do life. You become different after Christ fulfills you. If you are empty on the inside, so if you're a person who is empty on the inside, you will tend to react in a way that is not healthy and not productive. If you are full on the inside with Christ, you will tend to respond in a way that is going to be God honoring. And that's the two kind of concepts that you have here. So then, because Christ has filled your heart, and because you are created for relationship with him, because Christ has met your legitimate needs that you could not get met anywhere else, he's met your legitimate needs, now you are going to learn how to respond in a right manner. So instead of reacting, that's not what we're going to do. Now we're going to respond. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be, and here's your response, be swift to hear. Now these are in relationships with other people. Be slow to speak, and be slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So how does a godly person respond when Christ fills your heart? He meets every legitimate need. Well, you are somebody then who is swift, or I'm going to put quick to hear, or I'll use the word listen, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. That's how a godly person responds. A godly person is quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. But do you know how an ungodly, somebody who has not had Christ fulfilling their lives? Let me just erase this here. You know how somebody responds who Christ hasn't fulfilled their lives? Somebody who's empty on the inside? You know how they don't respond, they react. And do you know how they react? Well, they react in this way. Swift to hear is what God has called us to be, but that's not how they do. Instead, they are slow to listen. Slow to speak is not what they do. Now they're quick to speak. And slow to wrath is not what they do. Now they're quick to wrath, or I'm going to use the word anger. That's how ungodliness acts. When Christ has not fulfilled your life, when you are missing key things in life, that you are empty on the inside, you are still searching for God, for illegitimate ways to meet the legitimate need, you will be a person who just reacts, being very ungodly, and the way you'll react is exactly opposite of how you're supposed to react. You'll be slow to listen, you'll be quick to speak, quick to get angry. How many of you have had conflicts that have been because of these things? You, instead of listening to the whole conversation, listening to what the other person had to say, listening to what was being said and understanding the whole concepts, you just shut your ears. You wouldn't listen. It didn't matter what they said. You would not listen. Instead, you were quick to speak, and you were quick to give an answer, and you were quick to be sharp with your tongue, and you were quick to get angry. I would submit to you that I believe that this is the way that the majority of the world acts today. And I would even go further and say that this is the way that the majority of the United States acts today. The United States today, which saddens me greatly, but the U.S. today does not listen to one another anymore. Instead, they have formed their own opinions, their own ideas, their own understandings, and they will not listen. They're slow to listen. They're quick to shout, quick to speak, quick to say hurtful things, and they're quick to blow up in anger. A godly person does not respond in that way. A godly person doesn't respond the way that the world does. A godly person responds by being quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Well, that's all I have to share with you today. I hope that this encourages you and helps you as you walk with the Lord. And I hope that you'll join me back here as we get into verse 21 of chapter 1 of the book of James next time. I'll see you then. Have a great day. And until then, stay honoring God in all that you do.